Welcome to Gameonysus Weekly, your one-stop shop for video game news, keeping up with the biggest stories so you don't have to. I'm your host, Janet Garcia, and today we're talking about a bunch of PlayStation news, including the state of Naughty Dog and why Shawn Layden left PlayStation, plus some upcoming showcases. All these stories and so much more on today's episode. Kicking things off, let's talk about the state and future of Naughty Dog. For this, I'm pulling from Ben Reeves' reporting over at Game Informer with the article entitled Naughty by Nature, Naughty Dog Leadership Reflects on the Studio's History. There's a lot to dig into from this exclusive interview, but I'm just going to pull a few of the most pertinent questions that kind of stood out to me. But again, I encourage all of y'all to check out the article in its entirety, and it is in this sort of Q&A format. Though I do want to start off with one sort of, silly question about the studio name, like essentially why did they come up with that studio name, to which Evan Wells answered, I love it. I think it's got a great history at this point. When Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin founded the company, they were called Jam Software, which was maybe cool back in the 80s, but probably not so cool today. They were about to publish their first game with EA, and they went, there's already a Jam Software, so you've got 24 hours to come up with a new name. That's where Naughty Dog came from. I think it works. I like the name and I wouldn't want to change it now. Which is sort of interesting to me because, they say Jam Software was very 80s, which I do think Jam Software is more 80s than Naughty Dog is. But Naughty Dog has always struck me as like a sort of, older studio name. Like I just couldn't imagine anyone coming out in like 2021 and calling themselves Naughty Dog. But the idea that they just sort of pulled that out of their back pocket because they had to come up with something new is pretty amusing because I always pictured it, being something that they maybe mulled over for a bit longer. But, I think the name does work. It's what I can't imagine knowing that studio as anything else. And it's sort of become synonymous with this, really iconic era of gaming for me personally. And it's certainly something that's carried through the years. Continuing on, in this interview, they were asked, do you have any desire to go towards lighter fare or return to your roots to those kid-friendly games? To which Evan Wells says, if we had endless resources and time, it would be super fun to do that. You look at what Insomniac is doing with Ratchet & Clank, and it's exciting. It's great to see that stuff. We're just limited with time. I'm 48 years old, and how many more games do you get to make? So you gotta pick and choose. Neil Druckmann chimed in saying, once we finish a project, we spend quite a bit of time entertaining all sorts of different directions, whether it's going to be something new or if we're going back to some old franchise. We really take our time with it, and if you were to see our folders of concept art, you'd see unused concepts that are all over the gamut. Then we look at everything and we ask ourselves, what are we excited by? What's something that's going to challenge us and push the medium as far as what games can be? Because that inspiration is so important to carry through years of production. Which, all this is to say that like Jak 4, that's probably never going to be a thing, which is fair. I mean, that trilogy was very much like tied and ended, and as someone that's a huge fan of it and would totally be excited for Jak 4, I don't necessarily feel like that's what the studio necessarily should do or what the industry even needs. Like, I think it's sometimes best to leave well enough alone at this point. But it definitely did feel like a bit of a nail in the coffin in that sense of the idea of them returning to some of, what I initially fell in love with the studio for. But again, that love has since grown, and I think their identity as a studio has grown as well. And, they're kind of a bit past that sort of starting point that they had, which, isn't the worst fate. I mean, I think becoming washed or just stagnant is definitely a much bigger risk. So it's cool that they have, continued to evolve. And I think they've done a really good job at walking that line between creating really iconic franchises and also knowing when to walk away from those franchises as well. And then we get some really great questions regarding just sort of the working conditions and the studio's mindset in regards to that. So I'm going to pull from two questions from the interview. They do have kind of lengthy answers, but it starts off with, Naughty Dog has such a proven track record, but that hasn't come without cost. Over the years, you've come under fire for studio crunch. Could you speak to your personal experience with crunch and how that's affected the studio? Evan Wells says, I have definitely personally worked very hard over the years. I think some of that has helped me get to where I am in my career. As a studio, we've all worked hard together, and we are working very hard on every project to find the right balance, just like we do in all our technical aspects of creating a game. We have postmortems, and we look at how the animation went, and we look at how the design went, and we really dig into all the things that could have been better and all the things we got right. We do the same thing with production. We look at how the whole game was created and where we can make improvements and how we can strike the right balance between giving people the opportunity to, as I mentioned earlier, leave their mark on the industry and advance their craft in ways that have never been achieved, but also find space along that spectrum. Neil Druckmann said, "We have so many talented people that are good at solving problems, whether they're creative or technical. Let me go back to The Last of Us Part 2. Some pillars that were important to us were diversity in the people we hire and the characters that we have in our game, as well as accessibility and how to make our games more accessible. Likewise, we're looking at quality of life for preventing burnout, to employ the brain power we have in our studio, and we start coming up with working groups to talk about the areas in the studio where we can improve. We worked a particular way when we were 40 people. Now we have to evolve as we keep growing." Wells adds, "Something else that we're really focused on is increasing the level of management at the studio. We have more directors and more leads, all with the end goal of giving the entire team more opportunities to provide feedback and check in on their well-being." Druckmann adds, "Everybody has a different definition of what crunch means, and I guess for us, we think of it as, how do we look out for the well-being of our colleagues and everyone that works at Naughty Dog, which is some combination of how many hours you work and how much stress you're feeling, whether that's something that's going on in the office or at home. We find that there is no one solution that fits everybody. Everybody has a unique situation we might need to address." Next, they're asked, one of the things that the industry has talked about as a possible solution is unionization. Do you have thoughts on unionization? Evan Wells says, "I haven't put a lot of thought into it. I don't know if that would be a solution for crunch. To Neil's point about making sure that everybody is able to work as hard or as little as they want, we've got to create an environment that allows that. If we had some sort of restriction where when the clock strikes 40 hours, the server shut down and you can't work anymore, that would frustrate people to no end. There are people who really want to put in that extra polish on their own volition, and they would feel handcuffed." Druckmann adds, "We've tried stuff like Evan is describing in the past, where we've said, okay, no one is working past this hour, or it's mandatory that no one can work on Sunday. And there are always a lot of corner cases of someone saying, well, I couldn't work on Friday because I had to be with my kids. It's actually more convenient for me to come in on Sunday. When you try to have a silver bullet, like one solution, you're always leaving someone behind. That's why we feel like we need multiple solutions. We have to approach this from multiple angles." And, there's a lot to unpack. And I think these statements, definitely, there's a heavy emphasis on working hard, which is something I can definitely relate to. And I think a lot of people in development or, in my experience, I always draw comparisons to games media because that's what I'm familiar with. Talk about their work in that way. And that's, a very real thing. So I think just the lead in with the amount of work is a little bit telling because that was very much a focus in Wells's response. But for me, the thing that really stood out here is this sort of comment on unionization, the idea of capping work hours. So, really, first of all, Wells saying like, oh, I haven't thought about unionization at all. I just feel like that's such a ridiculous statement. Surely everyone has thought about unionization at some point, even if your thought is like, I don't want unionization or I don't think it'd work for our studio or whatever. But of course, for a question like this, I totally expect this kind of answer. I wouldn't expect him to say, no, I don't think this is a good idea, because then all these headlines would say like, Naughty Dog heads are anti-union. And I definitely wouldn't expect him to say, I think it's a good idea, because then you'll see the opposite headline. So this is a great way to skirt the question, but I don't buy it. It is what he sold and it is what we got. So, that element makes sense and doesn't surprise me. I do think as far as mandates on hours, so often I hear from leadership make those kind of comments, or even sometimes workers make those kind of comments of, oh, well, I want to do this, I want to be able to like wrap this thing up, or I want to put in the extra time. And no, it's not a problem. Like, I'm happy to do it. It's what I want to do. It's where my passion lies. But, I think that's totally ignoring the fact that being a workaholic is totally a thing and applauded addictions are totally a thing. And I think, especially in an industry like this that is so technically challenging and so creative and from such a place of passion, it's so easy to get away with doing that. And people let you and often applaud it. You're seen as someone who gets the job done, who goes above and beyond and all these other elements. And sure, the sort of proposition is, oh, if some people want to work a lot, that's fine. If some people just want to work the hours that are required, that's fine. But I think the idea of we have to, let workers work over time if they want to like fit their own happiness is just a little bit ridiculous to me, in the sense that like you choose how you run your studio and how you manage your employees. And certainly the inverse wouldn't be true. If you were under the amount of time that you were contracted to work, I don't think you could necessarily just do that. I'm sure there's edge cases, of course, I'm not going to pretend like or necessarily suggest that they don't care about their employees or aren't, making considerations for them or anything like that. But I just feel like it's not exactly I don't agree with that as an answer. And I feel like it's a bit of a non-answer. I think the idea of, oh, well, we can't find a silver bullet, so, we'll see. It's like, okay, so sure, maybe there's not a one size fits all, but there's also not an additional concrete suggestion proposed here either. So that's sort of my gut reaction on the whole situation. But I do want to pull from a tweet I saw from Katie Coronis, I'm not sure how to say her last name, but she is a lead content designer at Riot Games and someone I follow in the game development side, who I really appreciate her perspective on things. And she had quote tweeted another thread, so I'll be linking that in the show notes as well. But she had quote tweeted this thread saying, "This is a good thread. In my opinion, there should be limits on employee hours worked, period. But without addressing the actual sources of crunch, we are just treating symptoms with hour caps." She then goes on to add, another source, for example, is US law usually requires contract employees to be paid 1.5x their hourly wage for overtime. So game dev contractors, which is a huge percentage of the workforce, often make a good chunk of their pay in overtime hours. Asking contractors to work fewer hours necessitates base pay raises. Now, of course, that's a different situation than if you're, salaried at a studio, but I feel like that's still all a part of the industry at large. And then the thread she was kind of referring to is by Aaron San Filippo, who's a developer himself, apparently, according to his Twitter bio, making a game called Whisker Squadron, which, I don't know, I think there's cats and jets or something, which seems pretty cool. But I digress. The thread just sort of breaks down like the things that cause crunch and how things end up kind of going out of scope. And ultimately, he ends the thread by saying, as I see it, crunch is most often a thing that's generated from the creative teams within game development. Design is such a difficult, volatile thing. Most game designers aren't experts at predicting how long things will take and how much time it takes to make the art, etc., and to do their work. Then saying, I think it's too simplistic to think we can solve crunch by telling people to go home on weekends. We need to recognize the dynamic and creative nature of the craft of game design and also recognize this is where crunch comes from 90% of the time and focus on that divide. So lots of different perspectives as far as, what could solve or decrease the amount of crunch, but the sort of non-answer, like, oh, everyone's different, so we'll sort of see, really was unsatisfying to me, and I really would hope to hear more, at least at some point, from the studio, especially from studio leadership. I mean, to me, that would be a lot better than, what we got out of this interview. In this interview, they also get asked about, what is sort of the future, like as people move away from big story-driven stuff and multiplayer, like, do you still think story-driven and single-player is the future? And they're like, yeah, like, we're always looking to do, what we're passionate about. It's not a mandate, but, like, we love telling these kind of stories, and we plan to continue to tell these kinds of stories. They were also asked, do you want to continue to work on the IP you've established, or do you desire to create new properties at this point? Evan Wells, of course, said, I think the answer is both. There's excitement to develop new IP, but there is still a ton of love for Uncharted and The Last of Us, and I think you'll see both kinds of projects from us in the future. And again, some other fun details included in there, so definitely check out that article and interview done by Ben Reeves. And for another interesting PlayStation-centric interview, Jason Schreier at Bloomberg wrote, former PlayStation chief muses on the future of gaming, interviewing Shawn Layden, and it also includes why Shawn Layden left PlayStation. The article reads, on September 30th, 2019, Sony Group Corp abruptly announced on the PlayStation Twitter account that longtime boss Shawn Layden was stepping down. The company didn't say why he was leaving, and Layden has mostly stayed quiet about his departure, until now. At the time, Layden had launched 6 video game consoles and was getting burned out. Quote, it's a young person's activity, Layden told me during a recent video call. I felt this is a good time to put a pin in my legacy. The former chief executive officer of PlayStation Worldwide Studios noted that he'd shepherded some of the highest rated games of the decade, such as Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War. That seemed like a good time to step off on top and allow another generation to take the PlayStation 5 to market. But there was speculation in the gaming press that Layden's exit was actually the result of a power struggle between him and current boss Jim Ryan, who oversaw the launch of the PlayStation 5 last year. Layden wouldn't get into specifics there. I think I took my time at the moment I saw best to take it, Layden said, and I couldn't be happier. And, I think it's really interesting that this piece is sort of, coming out within let's say within a week or so of the Naughty Dog piece, which addresses sort of work culture as well, where it's like, yeah, I mean, this industry is really difficult. And, a lot of people cite burnout or trying to avoid burnout as a reason to leave. And certainly that's good for any industry, to walk away before you feel like it's time to walk away. I mean, I think it's a very relatable sentiment. And certainly I can imagine the amount of work and stress of being that high up in a company that's that big of a deal. Yeah, it makes sense. But it is interesting to hear, I think, someone of Layden's stature talk about this, because, again, it affects everybody, and we all go through like similar struggles as people who are creative, people who work in the arts, people who are part of a team or lead a team. And I also think it's kind of nice to like get this messaging out there, because there are a lot of people who rightfully so, really like Shawn Layden and miss his role and involvement in the company. And I think sometimes it's nice to hear about why someone's not doing what you may want them to do as like a fan, and kind of see like the human side of them. So I really like him coming out here and addressing that, so that when people were like, oh, we missed Shawn Layden, let's bring Shawn Layden back. It's like, okay, well, let's let Shawn Layden do what Shawn Layden wants to do, and, sort of see what the future holds, which is what the rest of the interview kind of digs into. The piece continues saying Layden's next big job, his third act, as he calls it, is a position on the advisory board at Streamline Media Group, a game services company where he will advise the company on its global strategy for video games and enterprise. And, we'll see if anything, significant and noteworthy sort of comes out of that role. I think having like an advisory role is a very common position people seem to take when they're in that like retired, not retired, I left my main thing and I'm doing something a little bit different. A lot of folks seem to kind of shift into those more advisory roles. So yeah, we'll sort of see what comes out of that, and, how long he holds that position, if he ends up doing other things. And again, it's really Sony season with like these random news stories this week, but we got updates on the pre-order and the upgrade system for Horizon Forbidden West. And originally it was going to be you have to get like a certain edition if you want the PS4 version, and then to be able to play like the PS5 version with the PS4 version, if that sentence makes sense, right? Like you can't just pay for the upgrade or, get the upgrade for free. That's what they were pitching just a few days ago. And at the time of this recording, literally today on Saturday, they were like, hold on, never mind, we changed all of that. And this is an update that they posted on the PlayStation blog regarding, again, the pre-order for Horizon Forbidden West, now collector's editions and digital deluxe editions detailed. And in this, they mention players who purchase Horizon Forbidden West on PlayStation 4 will be able to upgrade to the PlayStation 5 version for free. And in some ways, more importantly, they also added, I also want to confirm today that moving forward, PlayStation first-party exclusive cross-gen titles, newly releasing on PS4 and PS5, both digital and physical, will offer a $10 USD digital upgrade option from PS4 to PS5. This will apply to the next God of War and Gran Turismo 7, and any other exclusive cross-gen PS4 and PS5 title published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. And that free upgrade for Horizon was initially promised like a long time ago, and then they kind of decided, oh, never mind, and then they were like, oh, never mind again. So it was this weird reversal. And I don't know, we've kind of seen this kind of thing happen a few times throughout the year, with PlayStation specifically. We saw it with the, are they closing the PS Vita store and these other storefronts? And then they're like, okay, never mind. People seem to care about this. On the Xbox side of things, when they were thinking about changing what it costs for like their online gaming subscription, they were like, never mind, we heard you. So it kind of feels like it's of that ilk, with a smidge less ownership. So I'm not really sure what happened internally. I'm not really getting from this, oh, we like heard your feedback and decided to change it, from what we had propositioned. But presumably, I imagine that would have to have been the case, because why else would you have, within a few days, totally gone back on the initial proposition. And I also think it's interesting that now it's like, okay, pitched moving forward, where this is how we're going to do it. I do like that this now eliminates the question. Before this, it was constantly, okay, is it going to be like a free upgrade? Is there not really going to be a way to upgrade at all? Is it going to be, we're going to wait for the director's cut to drop, and then we'll maybe upgrade to the director's cut, and it kind of has both, and then you can sort of piecemeal if you want just the next gen, or you want the next gen and the director's cut. And there's always just additional layers involved with the whole situation during, you know, this early stages of the PS5's life. And now we at least have an answer. I will say it's not, you know, the best answer we could have, because I think the best answer would just be it's free to upgrade. But of course, then you could argue, well, you know, the whole idea of next gen costing more to develop, / like they're charging more for having developed a next gen game. But then if it's on both and it's the same price, there's just all these like additional layers to it. So, you know, none of this will really be a problem once there's a hard split between there's PS4 games and then there's PS5 games, and this game's like only on PS5 and it's not available through any backwards compatibility at all. But until then, we are sort of in an awkward spot. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I do take this as good news. It is not the absolute best outcome, but it is pretty good. And I think it's definitely nice to see that they're doing just that free upgrade for Horizon, at least. So yeah, you know, I'm not really sure what the general read from the community is. I mean, I feel like because everyone was so negative on this, is instantly seen as like, okay, they're righting a wrong to a degree. But hopefully in the PlayStation 6, I don't want to see any of this. Like, I hope this gets worked out and that this just is a non-issue moving forward for future generations, but we'll see. Let's talk about some game events that are coming up. Continuing with the PlayStation news, there is a PlayStation Showcase happening on Thursday at 1 p.m. PT. That's Thursday, September 9th. The blog post reads, "You've been awfully patient and we thank you for that. And now we're looking forward to showing you what we've been working on. Tune in next Thursday, September 9th at 1 p.m. PT. For a look into the future of the PlayStation 5, the showcase will weigh in at around 40 minutes and include updates from PlayStation Studios and some of the industry's most imaginative. The showcase will weigh in around. Tune in next Thursday, September 9th at 1 p.m. PT for a look into the future of the PS5. The showcase will weigh in at around 40 minutes and include updates from PlayStation Studios and some of the industry's most imaginative developers for games releasing this holiday and beyond. And stick around after the presentation to get more updates from some of the studio teams featured in the showcase. One thing to note, PlayStation's next generation of VR won't make an appearance this time, but there will still be plenty of great PS5 games from developers large and small. We hope you can join us." And to celebrate the 10th anniversary of THQ Nordic, they are throwing a digital party in which they're doing their first ever digital showcase. That showcase is happening on September 17th at 9 p.m. CST, 12 p.m. PT on YouTube, Twitch, and Steam. They follow up by saying it will be hosted by Jeff Keighley and will feature 6 new games. Witness the return of legendary franchises and sequels to beloved games. So those are 2 showcases you have to look forward to. Moving on to game releases and updates. A sequel to Coffee Talk was confirmed and slated for 2022. It's called Coffee Talk Episode 2, Hibiscus and Butterfly. The Steam description reads as follows: "Dust off your coffee machine and prepare your warmest smile to meet your favorite customers again in the second episode of Coffee Talk, a coffee brewing and heart-to-heart talking simulator." And this isn't a game I played, but my brother Edwin played the first one and was really into it. I feel like it is my type of game, so it is cool seeing this get a sequel. You know, indie sequels aren't super common. So if you're into visual novels, if you like coffee, if you like simulators, check out the first one in preparation for this one coming out next year. And Nintendo announced Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain, coming out December 3rd, 2021. This is the 3rd game in this franchise, and I personally am not familiar with this one, but I was really into Brain Age at the time, and I think I'd be down for something like this. It is very much in that ilk, and here is how the description reads on the Nintendo page. Take on a series of brain-bending activities that test your mental mettle. Play a wide variety of activities like memorizing a series of numbers, identifying an animal as it slowly comes into focus, or helping guide a train to its goal in fun, fast activities. Go brain to brain with friends and family in 4-player matches to see who can get the highest score. Everyone can play together at varying difficulties, so a kid can hold their own against an adult in this battle of the brains. Get your own big brain bronze score with a fun test. Boost your skill and speed by practicing certain activities. Of course, you can also prep for your next multiplayer brain battle or compare scores with family and friends. Unlock dozens of outfit options for your in-game avatar, from a cat outfit to a corn costume. Want to see how you match up to brainiacs around the world? Hop into Ghost Clash mode to compete against other user data. Choose from mental marvels worldwide, folks on your friends list, or family members who have profiles in the same system. Outside of Ghost Clash mode, check your rankings to see how your big brain brawn matches up against others. And that brings us to the For the Free section. September's PlayStation Plus games are Overcooked All You Can Eat, that one's PlayStation 5 exclusive, Hitman 2 for PS4, and Predator Hunting Grounds for PS4. Overcooked All You Can Eat, you already know what it is. If you've been following me and my work for a while, you know I adore this game. I have platinumed this game. This game is good as hell. And what's cool is that it combines both of the games. So you have Overcooked 1, you have Overcooked 2, and then you also have all of the DLC across both games. And I believe it is a little bit like, you know, polished and like looks a little bit nicer. But to be honest, that's a little bit negligible when it's just cartoon chefs cutting, you know, up ingredients and things. But I love this so much. And it's also really cool this is included in PS Plus, because I know it's been in some ways a hard sell for people if they already maybe own the game on one platform or they own one of the games already. They're like, I don't really want to buy this and just to get everything bundled. But now it's here for free if you have PS Plus. No reason not to download this. It is fantastic. So go check this one out. And Hitman 2 is cool. Like, Hitman's good. Again, kind of a known quantity, but this is a pretty solid month for PS Plus. And then this info dropped last week, but I must have missed it. Xbox Games with Gold for September 2021. We got Warhammer Chaos Bane, available from September 1st to the 30th. Mulaka, September 16th to October 15th. Zone of the Enders HD Collection, September 1st to the 15th. Samurai Showdown 2, September 16th to the 30th. I'm not personally super familiar with any of these except for Mulaka, which is a game I ultimately did not like, though the concept is really cool, kind of looking at Mexican indigenous communities and sort of pulling from that into making the gameplay, but it just really didn't hit for me. So for me personally, not the most exciting month for Xbox Games with Gold, but those are the games you can pick up. And then for Game Pass, Craftopedia, it's in game preview form, which I feel like that's kind of unique. On cloud, console, and PC, you arrive on a small island packed with animals, resources, and infinite possibilities. What you do in this game is completely up to you. Gather resources, harvest crops, fight bosses, capturing enemies, building a lovely house, unlocking new islands, exploring the world, and more. What will you do when you can do anything you've ever dreamt of? Final Fantasy 13, console and PC. Signs of the Sojourner, cloud, console, and PC. This game is fantastic. It is a narrative deck building game, but it is a very simplistic deck building game. So if you're someone who does not like card games, do not be scared off. It's really easy to pick up, and I just absolutely adored playing this. I think the writing is really good. I think the art style is really unique. It's just a fantastic journey, and it has like a really fun in-game map where you're kind of traveling across and deciding, okay, how much. It's sort of this pull and push between how long you want to be out on the road before you need to like come back and sort of rest and replenish things. And it's honestly a standout game for me in terms of like games I've played in recent history. Oh, and then sidebar, if you bought the Bundle for Racial Justice and Equality from itch.io last summer, I believe it was, you already own this game on PC. I'm just going to throw that part out there because I know it's a pretty popular bundle. But going back to the games, we got Surgeon Simulator 2, cloud, console, and PC. Crown Trick, console, and PC, coming out September 7th. Welcome to the Nightmare Realm. Guide protagonist Elle on a perilous journey through procedurally generated dungeons, carefully navigating unique enemies and traps that only move when Elle does, thanks to Crown Trick's unique synchronous turn-based mechanic. We got Breath Edge, or is it Breathe Edge, on cloud, console, and PC, inspired by retro futurism, Soviet aesthetics, and dark comedy movies. Breath Edge is a fresh take on the survival genre that puts you in control of a simple guy called The Man, who is carrying his grandpa's ashes to a galactic funeral and suddenly finds himself in the middle of a universal conspiracy. Even as I was reading that, I had no idea where that was going. So definitely a wild one. That's out September 9th on Game Pass. And Crown Trick was September 7th. Nuclear Throne, console and PC, September 9th. Nuclear Throne is a post-apocalyptic roguelike top-down shooter. The Artful Escape comes to console and PC September 9th. This is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. It's sort of like this psychedelic, story-driven experience. The pitch is a teenage guitar prodigy sets out on a psychedelic, multidimensional journey to inspire his stage persona to confront the legacy of a dead folk legend. And those are some games you can pick up for free. And those are all the stories we have for this week. Thank you so much for watching on youtube.com/Gameonysus. Be sure to like, subscribe, tap the bell, and leave a comment. And for listening on podcast services, be sure to subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice and leave a review if possible, because it helps the show a whole lot. And as always, a huge thanks to my patrons over on Patreon. You too can join over on patreon.com/Gameonysus. We have rewards as low as the $1 all the way up to the $25 tier. And as always, I will see you here next time. Bye.